Imagine you find your dream home, the one you've been working toward your entire adult life. The house with the wide porch and the tall trees, and the kind of stillness on a Sunday morning that makes you feel like the world has finally slowed down just for you. You sign the papers, you get the keys, you drive past it on the way home just to look at it, just to feel that thing again. That certainty that this is it. Now imagine, 3 days later, you open your mailbox. There's a letter inside. No return address, no postage stamp, just your name on the front, written in careful, deliberate handwriting, the kind of handwriting that takes its time. You open it, and the first line reads,
"Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood."
You exhale. Maybe it's a neighbor. Maybe this is just what people do on this street. You keep reading, and then the next line stops you cold.
How did you end up here? Did 657 Boulevard call to you with its force within?
You read it again, because surely you misread it. Surely this is a joke, a prank from someone who knows you just moved in. Surely there is a reasonable explanation for why a stranger is asking if the house called to you, with its force within. But then you keep reading, and by the third paragraph, your hands are shaking. By the fifth, you can't finish it. By the time you fold it back up and walk inside and close the door behind you, you understand something that no amount of logic will undo. Someone has been watching this house. Someone knows you moved in. Someone has already seen your children, and they wanted you to know. What I just described to you isn't a scene from a horror film. It isn't the setup for a psychological thriller or the first chapter of a best-selling novel. It happened. It happened to a real family, in a real house, on a real street in New Jersey, and it destroyed their lives in ways they are still recovering from today. This story is called The Watcher, and before it's over, you're going to understand exactly why. June 2014, Westfield, New Jersey, one of the safest, most picturesque towns in the entire United States. Tree-lined streets, good schools, the kind of neighborhood where people leave their cars unlocked and kids still play outside until the streetlights come on. It was, by every measure, the perfect place to raise a family. Derek Broaddus thought so too. 3 days after he and his wife Maria signed the papers on their dream home, a gorgeous Dutch colonial revival at 657 Boulevard, they walked to their mailbox and found an envelope. No return address, no postage stamp, just 3 words written on the front.
The new owner.
Derek opened it, and as his eyes moved across the page, the world he had carefully built for his family, the dream, the house, the future, began to collapse. Let me read you the first letter, because no summary can prepare you for what it actually feels like to encounter these words. This is not fiction. This is not a dramatization. These are the real words written to a real family with 3 small children by someone who was already watching them. It started, as I mentioned, with a greeting, almost a warm one.
Dearest new neighbor at 657 Boulevard, allow me to welcome you to the neighborhood.
And then within a single sentence, the temperature dropped.
How did you end up here? Did 657 Boulevard call to you with its force within?
Force within. He believed the house had a power, a pull, that it reached out and drew people to it, and that he was the one appointed to oversee that process.
657 Boulevard has been the subject of my family for decades now, and as it approaches its 110th birthday, I have been put in charge of watching and waiting for its second coming. My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time. Do you know the history of the house? Do you know what lies within the walls of 657 Boulevard? Why are you here? I will find out.
I will find out. Not a question, a promise. And then came the lines about the children.
Do you need to fill the house with the young blood I requested? Better for me. Was your old house too small for the growing family? Or was it greed to bring me your children? Once I know their names, I will call to them and draw them to me.
He had requested them. That word, requested. As though the children were something owed to him. Something he had been patiently waiting on. Something he already believed was his. The letter closed with a passage that somehow managed to be more unsettling than everything that came before it.
Who am I? There are hundreds and hundreds of cars that drive by 657 Boulevard each day. Maybe I am in one. Look at all the windows you can see from 657 Boulevard. Maybe I am in one.
Think about what he was doing there. He wasn't threatening them. He wasn't making demands. He was showing them the size of the trap. He was saying, I could be anyone. I could be everywhere. I could be watching you right now, and you would never know. The letter ended with a final line, a signature.
Welcome, my friends. Welcome. Let the party begin.
Signed, the Watcher. The Broaddus family went to the police immediately, and here's where the story takes its first deeply unsettling turn, because the police had almost nothing to go on. No fingerprints usable enough to trace, no footage, no witnesses who had seen anyone near the mailbox. The letter had simply appeared, the way something appears when whoever left it knows exactly what they're doing. Officers gave the Broaddus family instructions that should have offered comfort, but instead added a new layer of dread. Do not tell your neighbors. Do not discuss this publicly. Treat everyone as a potential suspect. Everyone. Think about what that means. You've just moved to a new neighborhood. You're trying to build a life, wave hello across the lawn, and now you're being told the person waving back could be him. The family who sold you the house could be him. The man who walks his dog every morning at 7 could be him. The woman who smiles when she picks up her mail could be her, because that was the terrifying reality the Watcher had spelled out himself. He was somewhere in plain sight, in one of hundreds of passing cars, or behind one of the many windows visible from the front porch, watching a family's daily movements with the patience of someone who had inherited this vigil from the people who came before him. The Broaddus family hired a private investigator. They brought in a former FBI profiler to analyze the letter. They installed cameras. They set up surveillance. And while all of that was happening, while they were scrambling to feel safe, to feel certain, to feel like something was being done, 2 weeks later, another letter arrived. Before we go any further, if this story is getting under your skin, that means we're doing our job. Subscribe to The Silent Scream so you never miss a story like this one. And drop the word Watcher in the comments if you've made it this far. We read every single one. Now, back to Westfield. The second letter arrived 2 weeks after the first. If the first letter was a statement of intent, the second was a declaration of ownership. Because this time, the Watcher had done exactly what he promised. He had found out their names.
I am pleased to know your names now, and the name of the young blood you have brought to me. You certainly say their names often.
You certainly say their names often. He had been close enough and for long enough to hear them calling their children from the yard, or through an open window. He hadn't just watched this family from a distance. He had listened to them, and now he knew. The family still hadn't moved in. They were renovating, living elsewhere, keeping their distance, and the Watcher had noticed. He had been watching the dark windows, the empty driveway, the silence where a family should have been. And in his second letter, he made clear that the wait was becoming unbearable. Not for him, but for the house itself.
657 Boulevard is anxious for you to move in. It has been years and years since the young blood ruled the hallways of the house. Have you found all of the secrets it holds yet? Will the young blood play in the basement? Or are they too afraid to go down there alone? I would be very afraid if I were them. It is far away from the rest of the house. If you were upstairs, you would never hear them scream.
You would never hear them scream. He knew the layout. He knew the basement was isolated. Whether he'd been inside before or had simply studied the house obsessively from the outside, he knew it the way someone knows a place they've spent years thinking about. And he was thinking about the children in it. He also wrote about the renovations. He wasn't neutral about them. He was furious.
The house is crying from all of the pain it is going through. You have changed it and made it so fancy. You are stealing its history. It cries for the past, and what used to be in the time when I roamed its halls. The 1960s were a good time for 657 Boulevard when I ran from room to room, imagining the life with the rich occupants there. The house was full of life and young blood. Then it got old, and so did my father, but he kept watching until the day he died, and now I watch and wait for the day when the young
He had
blood
been
will be
inside,
mine again.
or at least that's what he claimed. He had roamed the halls, ran from room to room as a child in the 1960s, while his father watched from outside. This house wasn't just an obsession, it was his childhood, his inheritance, his purpose, and the Broaddus family was inside it, changing it, and he needed them to feel exactly how that made him feel. Here is where the story becomes something more than a harassment case. During the investigation, a discovery emerged that reframed everything. The family who had sold 657 Boulevard to the Broaddus family, the Woods family, had also received a letter from the watcher. Before the sale, they had received it and had not disclosed it. They had quietly chosen to exit rather than face what was waiting on the other side of that envelope, which means the Broaddus family had purchased a house with a known threat already attached to it. And the watcher's own words told the full scope of just how long this had been going on.
My grandfather watched the house in the 1920s, and my father watched in the 1960s. It is now my time.
This was never about one family. It was never about the Broadduses specifically. The house was the obsession. Their own words made it plain.
657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession, and now you are too.
657 Boulevard had been watched continuously across nearly a century. Different families had come and gone. The names changed. The faces changed. But the watcher, or those who came before him, had always been there. Standing somewhere nearby, in a car or behind a window, watching as generation after generation tried to call that house a home. The Broaddus family hadn't stumbled into a trap set specifically for them. They had stumbled into a trap that had been waiting, patiently, for whoever moved in next. Every investigation needs a suspect, and investigators believed they had one. His name was Michael Langford. Langford was a lifelong Westfield resident, a man who had grown up on this street, who knew its rhythms and patterns with the intimacy that only decades of proximity can build. He lived with his elderly mother and had, by various accounts, an unusual and intense attachment to the neighborhood, to 657 Boulevard specifically. Investigators looked hard at Michael Langford. They interviewed him. They analyzed him. They watched him the way the watcher had watched the house, quietly, carefully, from a distance. They never found enough to charge him. No physical evidence, no confirmed sighting, nothing that could hold in a courtroom. And then came a discovery that complicated everything further. DNA testing on one of the watcher envelopes returned a result no one had anticipated. The profile recovered from the seal, from whoever had licked it shut before slipping it into the Broaddus mailbox, belonged to a woman, not Michael Langford, a woman. No match was ever found in any database. No name was ever attached to that profile. It sat there in an evidence file, a biological fingerprint belonging to someone who had sent these letters, who knew exactly what they were doing. And it led absolutely nowhere. Was it Langford working with someone? A woman acting alone? Were there multiple people involved, maintaining across generations a shared secret and a shared obsession with a house on a quiet street in New Jersey? No one could answer those questions. No one can answer them still. When people talk about the Watcher case, they tend to focus on the letters, the language, the mystery, the suspects. But the part of this story I find most devastating is this. The Broaddus family never moved in, not once. They never unpacked a single box inside those walls. They never watched their children eat breakfast in that kitchen or run through that backyard on a summer morning. The house they had sacrificed everything to buy, $1.4 million, every last cent of financial security they had, sat empty on 657 Boulevard while they continued paying the mortgage from a safe distance, month after month, payment after payment, on a house they were too terrified to enter. Eventually, they rented it out, and the renter, not long after moving in, received a letter, addressed not to the new occupant, but directly to Derek and Maria Broaddus. Whoever the watcher was, They knew the family had moved on, and they had something to say about
To
it.
the vile and spiteful Derek and his wench of a wife Maria.
The careful, ceremonial tone of the first letters was gone. What remained was something raw, more personal, more enraged. And then, buried in the same letter,
You
a
wonder
taunt.
who the Watcher is? Turnaround idiots. Maybe you even spoke to me, one of the so-called neighbors, who has no idea who the Watcher could be. Or maybe you do know and are too scared to tell anyone. Good move. 657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession.
Turn around, idiots. He was close enough that they may have spoken to this person, may have smiled at them, may have shaken their hand at some point on some ordinary afternoon on that ordinary street. And somewhere in that neighborhood, they were watching them realize that. They tried to sell the house, but word had spread. People were already calling it the Watcher House. And no one with full knowledge of what it had become was willing to step into that story. They proposed demolishing the structure and subdividing the land. Rejected. They proposed building 2 smaller homes on the property. Rejected again. The financial toll was staggering. The emotional toll was worse. Maria Broaddus described a level of anxiety and psychological damage that never fully resolved. Their children grew up in the shadow of a house they were never allowed to visit. A dream their parents had built for them that had become something unrecognizable. The Watcher had never needed to break in. They never needed to approach the door or do a single thing that would land them in a courtroom. The Watcher wrote letters, and that was enough to destroy a family. In 2019, 5 years after the first letter arrived, the Broaddus family finally sold 657 Boulevard. They had paid $1.4 million for it. They sold it for $959,000, a loss of nearly $500,000 on top of 5 years of mortgage payments, investigation costs, and everything else this house had taken from them. A new family moved in, and then something happened that no one involved in this case could have fully predicted. The letters stopped, completely, immediately, as though a switch had been flipped. The new family moved in and not a single letter arrived. No cryptic language, no references to young blood, no questions about the walls, nothing. The Watcher went silent. Now, you might think that's the comfort, the resolution buried somewhere inside the wreckage. But think about what that silence actually means. It means the Watcher was choosing who to target. This was never random, never compulsive. They had enough control, enough precision to simply stop, which means everything that happened to the Broaddus family was deliberate, calculated, chosen. The Broaddus family was selected, and when they were gone, so was their interest in making them suffer. That is not a comfort. That is something far, far worse. Netflix adapted this story into a series in 2022. Ryan Murphy brought it to millions of people sitting in the dark. Bobby Cannavale and Naomi Watts playing versions of Derek and Maria, watching a dramatized version of these events unfold on their screens. And when the credits rolled, they could close the app, turn on a light, pour themselves something warm, and remind themselves that stories end. This one doesn't. The Watcher was never caught, never identified with certainty, never charged, never confronted, never explained. The investigation is not active, but it is still open, according to the Union County Prosecutor's Office. This case officially remains unsolved. The Broaddus family lost years of their lives and nearly $500,000. And somewhere out there, in a car rolling slowly past 657 Boulevard, or behind one of the windows visible from the front porch, the person who did that to them likely still exists, still wakes up in the morning, still moves through an ordinary day in an ordinary town. The Watcher described themselves plainly, in their own words.
657 Boulevard is my job, my life, my obsession.
People don't walk away from their life's work. People don't abandon their obsessions. They just get quieter about them. So here's the question this case leaves behind, the one that doesn't resolve when the credits roll or when you close the tab and walk away from your screen. Is someone still out there? Right now, as you watch this, as the lights burn in those upstairs windows and a family goes about the quiet business of an ordinary evening, dinner on the table, children doing homework, a dog asleep by the door, is someone on that sidewalk in a car drifting slowly by, pausing just long enough to look up at the windows of 657 Boulevard? The Watcher was never caught, never identified, never explained, and whoever the watcher was, they could still be out there. So I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually think about it before you answer. Who do you think the watcher is? Because after everything you just heard, the letters, the language, the detail about running through those halls as a child in the 60s, the DNA that came back as a woman, the fact that it all stopped the moment the Broaddus family left, you have a theory. I know you do. Was it a neighbor who spent decades building an obsession in silence? Was it a family passing this ritual down like some twisted inheritance? Was it someone the Broaddus family looked in the eye and never suspected for a single second? Drop your theory in the comments. Tell me who you think was standing on that sidewalk. Tell me what you think is still happening on 657 Boulevard tonight, because the case is still open. The watcher was never found, and somewhere out there, someone knows exactly who wrote those letters. Maybe it's even someone watching this video right now. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.